Hey there everybody, Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of Forgotten Favorites, where we look at some oldies but goodies, or maybe more recent stuff, or in general things that just kind of flew a little bit under the radar for a lot of people. But for me, stuff that I've always really liked, or in this instance, some stuff that I've gotten recently that's really cool, that again, pretty unknown bands from the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, what have you. Maybe not on major labels, maybe pretty underground stuff, whatever, but really cool stuff, and I want to make sure I share this with you. So I got a little stack of things here, and hopefully you like what you see. Hopefully it makes you want to go out and investigate some of this stuff, because that's kind of what I've done with some of these. Others are, bands that I've, really been into, but just decided to start digging out of my stacks and whatever. But for a bunch of these are actually things that I've just picked up recently, and I have a few of you to thank for some of them. And that's how it goes on this channel, right? It's like, I a lot of times will recommend stuff to you guys to go out and check, and hopefully you buy and get into. But in a lot of cases, you guys recommend stuff to me, and I go out and investigate. And I got a couple things here that have been suggested by a few of you viewers. So thanks for that, guys. So we're going to start off first with a band from Canada who I had never heard about at all up until a couple months ago. The band is called Lynx. Their debut album is called Missing. Okay, that's this one right here. And their second album is called Sneak Attack. Okay, pretty cool album covers. See there? These guys, I believe, were from Toronto. Okay, this debut album came out in 1976. The follow-up came out in 78. I believe they had one more album, and that was it. Really cool music. It's kind of, typical kind of Canadian hard rock, AOR. Little touches of like kind of pomp and prog or what have you. I kind of get a little bit of, Styx, a little Toto, a little April Wine type of thing. But good, memorable tunes. Okay, it's pretty rockin' in spots, slightly proggy, but not. They're more just really good kind of melodic hard rock albums, and I really dig it, and I'm glad I kind of picked these up and investigated. So for the viewer or two on some of our Canadian shows that we did recently, we did like, Frank Marino and April Wine, and, with Tron, we did all these top 10 songs for a lot of the Canadian bands, and I got a couple guys who recommended those, so good stuff. All right, this is a band that I never owned their album, all right, but I remember growing up here in the Hudson Valley, New York. These guys played all over the place all the time. I always heard the band Trigger, okay, and they played a lot of the small clubs and venues around here in the late 70s, early 80s, and then before you know it, they were gone. Well, this is their one and only debut album, okay, which has been reissued by Rock Candy Records, and these guys put out a pretty popular demo back in the day, which got the attention of the folks at Casablanca Records, and eventually, of course, Gene Simmons gave the stamp of approval to the record label. It's like, hey, we should go out and sign these guys. So they got signed for their debut album, okay, self-titled. If you like Kiss and you like, Stars and Angel, that sort of thing, really good hard rock, very commercial sounding, a lot of hooks, a lot of great grooves and heavy riffs and things like that. A really good album, but this was to be the only one they ever released. And then they broke up, and, you know how the story goes, but a very solid album. It's actually cool to get this after all these years and remember seeing them. These guys were from New Jersey, and I think one of the members might have been from the Hudson Valley area, but most of them were from New Jersey. But a lot of people always assumed they kind of were from here because they played here all the time. I remember always here. It's like Trigger's playing here, Trigger's playing there, and you'd always see them opening up for a fairly known band at a lot of the clubs and small venues around here. So good album, well worth seeking out. All right, here's a band, another U.S. band, going back a ways to the early 70s. This is a band called Frigid Pink, Earth Omen. This was also recommended by one of our viewers. This is a band that I've always wanted to get into. In fact, I think I have all their first 3 albums. This was one of them. This is their 3rd album. In my Amazon kind of shopping cart, or to be viewed to purchase later cart for like the last bunch of years, and I just never pulled the trigger on them. And then I got a recommendation from one of our viewers that, and I don't even remember what we were discussing in the comments section of which video. I think we were talking about Hammett organ, guitar, Uriah Heep, Purple, something like that. Everybody knows I love that kind of stuff. And it was recommended that I start with this one because this is very much like a long lost Uriah Heep album, which I kind of agree. It's got a lot of Heep and Purple elements, heavy Hammett heavy Hammond organ, a lot of guitar, great vocals. Apparently, from what I've read, this is a very different lineup than what appeared on the first two albums, and they released one more album, and that was basically it. But this one is from 1972. Earth Omen by Frigid Pink. Like this a lot. Very good stuff. All right. We're going to stay in the U.S. here. Going back to 1969, a band from the Washington, D.C. area, a place that I go to quite a bit for my day job. And this is a band called, Hillow Hammet. Hammer is the name of the album. This was basically a one and done, pretty obscure band. There's not a lot of information known about these guys, but a very solid album. This was also recommended by one of our viewers to me. If you like that late 60s, early 70s kind of early, heavy, proto, hard rock, metal, blues rock type of sound, you're going to dig this. A lot of good crunchy guitars and really good vocals and pretty rockin' tunes. I dig this. Obscure, but great. What else we got here? Let's go to 1971. Sticking in the US of A here, right? Mitch Ryder and Detroit, the Detroit band, featuring Mitch Ryder, also featuring Steve Hunter and Brent Tuggle on co-lead guitars. Doesn't get much better than that, folks. This is a really good kind of, Detroit area hard rock and blues. If you love, kind of the MC5 and the early Ted Nugent, the Amboy Dukes, and early Alice Cooper, and all that kind of stuff. This is really good. Crispy, crunchy, bluesy hard rock from the early 70s. Cool album cover too, right? Good album. All right, going to go over to 1981, sticking in the US of A. Man, we got a lot of US stuff here. Well, that's going to change in a minute. But this is a band, I had always heard about these guys, and then my buddy Sam was kind of telling me, he has the original LP, and he was telling me how good of a band they were. So I decided to give it a shot, and I really like this a lot. The band is called Steeplechase. Okay, self-titled from 1981. I think they only had another album or two, if I'm remembering correctly. Really good kind of like early 80s melodic hard rock with slight touches of AOR and Pomp and Prog, right? I kind of get listening to these guys a little bit of Styx, a lot of Foreigner, like that early Foreigner, the really good kind of hard rocking but very melodic Foreigner. A little bit of Angel, a little bit of Billy Squier, early Billy Squier, maybe a little Kansas thrown in. Really strong. Great production qualities. This is the Metal Mind and Roadrunner remaster from a few years back. But really good, well-recorded, bright and shiny hard rock album, right? A lot of great choruses and crispy guitar work, really strong vocals, but just a very kind of approachable, memorable album, but it rocks, okay? All right, so now we're going to go all the way to Yugoslavia. Here's another album that was recommended by one of our viewers. This is the only one I checked out so far from this band. It's their debut. I've heard their second and third albums might even be better, but I wanted to start somewhere. So this band is called Smak, S-M-A-K, self-titled, all right, from 1975. Really good guitar and organ on this. Production's kind of messy. It's not the greatest sounding album in the world, but I love the content. The songs are really good. A lot of good like hard rock with touches of prog. I think their second and third album, from what I've heard, are a little proggier, a little more jazz fusion-y, but this is a really good kind of hard rock album with touches of prog. Like I said, good guitar and Hammond organ on that. I like it. Vocals aren't the greatest, but it's okay. The songs are still, pretty accessible. All right, here's another band. The band is called, how do you pronounce this? Dschinn? D-S-H-I-N-N. Dschinn, from 1972 from Germany. All right, I believe this is also another one-and-done thing. Great cover art on that from 1972. Really good hard rock. They might have had more albums, I'm not really sure. But, really good artwork. This CD reissue is remastered. Pretty colorful art, gotta like it. Good bluesy, heavy rock, lots of guitar. Like that too. Vocals pretty good. A lot of the in English, but big German accent, but good stuff. It's rocking. I dig it. As I dig this other one. So this also another recommendation. I've actually heard about these guys for a while, but never jumped on them. I'm a big Clem Clemson fan. All right, Clem obviously played with Humble Pie and lots of other great bands in the 70s. So he's here. This is Prehumble Pie. Clem on guitar and vocals. Bunch of other dudes. From 1969, these guys were signed to the Harvest label. Really good kind of late 60s, kind of bluesy hard rock. You know, if you like, Ainsley Dunbar's Retaliation and, Cream and a little bit of the Jimi Hendrix Experience, that sort of thing. Really good. Very bluesy, but pretty rocking in spots. Lots of great guitar work. I think, these guys none of the guys in the band, and, Clem specifically, were great singers, so it's not such an album to look for great singing, but the singing is competent, but the guitar playing and the overall arrangements are really cool. A really good bluesy hard rock album that I like. All right, back to the U.S. These are really cool. So this band was from upstate New York in the Rochester area. We're talking about, they signed to MCA Records in 1971, released both their debut and their follow-up in 1972, and by 1973, they were kaput, although they have gotten back together the last year or two, and I believe they've done another album, like in either 2017 or 18, something like that, played some live shows. I'm talking about the band Jukin Bone, their debut, Whiskey Woman. Okay, and by the way, this was another recommendation from a viewer, and their second album, which is called Way Down East. All right? These are really solid. Good early 70s heavy rock stuff with a little bit of a blues edge. Great vocals, a lot of great guitar work. If you like, the kind of bluesier, heavier Zeppelin stuff, right? But there's a strong, Aerosmith feel to these. Like the really early Aerosmith albums, like the first, 2 or 3, you'll like these because the vocals are very similar to Steven Tyler. Really good, raunchy, heavy rock. Early Ted Nugent, maybe, too. Good stuff. I like this band a lot. Probably one of my favorites out of this pile here. All right, so let's go to some more recent stuff here. So I picked these up. I've long been a fan of these guys in these two bands, or this band. These two, the Aristocrats. Okay, I've long been following Guthrie Govan, but I've never really bought any of his stuff. What a fantastic guitar player. Easily one of the best going today. And of course you got Brian Beller on bass and Marco Miniman on drums. So I picked up self-titled Aristocrats. When did this come out? 2011. All instrumental, kind of fusion-y, guitar-oriented rock and prog. Oof. Man, holy hell. And then Tres Caballeros, which I think came out in 2015 or 16. This shit is good stuff, folks. If you like rip-roaring, complex, jazzy, rocky, proggy instrumental music with insane guitar, bass, and drum work, whew, you cannot go wrong with these. I'm just more upset that I waited this long to dive into this stuff, because this is one of the best instrumental power trios going today, folks. Man, it's just incredible what those guys do together. Incredible. All right, I'm going to go back to the 90s for another trio that performed live quite a bit and released a few albums, and one of them is no longer with us, sadly. But I'm talking about these two releases right here, okay? So you got Shawn Lane on guitar, Jonas Helborg on bass, and Jeff Sipe on drums. So this, whereas these Aristocrats albums are more kind of, from a songwriting perspective and the arrangements, very, very meticulous kind of stuff, right? Very well orchestrated and arranged. These are more kind of like freeform jamming albums. So these are all, I believe these are all live recordings. These are all live stuff recorded throughout Europe in the kind of the mid-90s where these guys were playing together. And it's just, you're talking 30-minute, 25-minute long tracks. This one's got some shorter ones, but it's just a lot of jamming. And if you like the guitar work of Shawn Lane, who sadly is no longer with us, but probably one of the most talented guitar players of the last 30 plus years, and Hellborg is a great bass player. If you like Jaco Pastorius, you'll love this guy. And Sipe has done a lot of really great stuff on the jam band scene, but man, Shawn Lane ripping all over the place on these. Again, not the most structured music in the world, but if you just want to hear extended unbelievable jamming and synergy between 3 players. Check these out. So you got temporal analogies of paradise, okay, from Hellborg Lane, okay, and then this one is called Time is the Enemy. Crazy good stuff. Crazy good stuff. What else we got here? I picked this up because I happened to hear a kind of really rare Boston track, live track, something that they never recorded on any of their studio albums back a few months ago. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool, right? Early Boston stuff that they were playing live that they never recorded. How can I get a hold of that? So I found out that you can actually get a hold of that song. And the song I'm talking about is Television Politicians on this kind of rare radio broadcast live release called Boston at the Agora Ballroom, live at the Agora Ballroom, 1976. This was recorded September 27, 1976. The Agora Ballroom in Cleveland, Ohio. Apparently this was broadcast on the radio. So here you have the full set, all right? From 1976, you got rock and roll band Help Me, which is another unreleased Boston track that they wrote and played live but never included on an album. That's also a good hard rocker. Peace of Mind, Something About You, A Man I'll Never Be, and this is before they released the second album. Okay. Smokin', Foreplay, Long Time, Don't Be Afraid, More Than a Feeling, and Television Politician. It's kind of like a glorified bootleg, okay? Decent recording. I would say the band were probably not at their best this evening, but it's a good performance. Specifically, I think Brad Delp sounds a little off in some songs. So, if you're used to the really overly produced first 2 studio albums and all those rich vocal harmonies and all that kind of stuff, and then you listen to this, you're going to be like, wow, there's something missing, and he's kind of off key in a couple tunes, and he's really kind of straining to hit the high notes on a couple tracks, but it's still a really cool, I mean, how many times have you heard, full recordings from Boston early in their career, right? None. So with no official live album from them, back in the day, this is probably as close as it gets. So it's actually pretty good, though. The band are rocking pretty hard, all right? They pull off a lot of the stuff really, really well, and it's cool to hear those 2 kind of rare tracks on here. So well worth getting. Whatever, you can go out and find this on Discogs.com. If you're a Boston fan, you're going to want to have that. I'm glad I picked it up. All right, last but not least, the band that I've always kind of dug, but and had most of their, if not all of their early albums on either LP and cassette back in the day in the 80s and early 90s, and then just, for whatever reason, never replaced them on CD, and then just started having a conversation with some friends recently about Ronnie Laticro, the guitar player from this band. I know you probably know who I'm talking about, TNT, all right? And I've decided to pick up the CDs of those first 3 albums, which I really dig a lot. So we're talking about Knights of the New Thunder. Okay, this was, 1980, what the hell year was this, 87, 86, something like that. Really good album. These guys were from Sweden, Norway? Jesus, I forget. But the singer was, U.S. guy, Tony Harnell. Really good, kind of melodic, hard 80s hard rock with some fantastic guitar playing. Fantastic guitar playing. And then you got the Tell No Tales album. This was a fairly big hit for the band. Okay. You had Everyone's a Star, 10,000 Lovers in One was kind of somewhat of a hit. Child's Play, Northern Lights, really good tunes. Memorable kind of 80s hard rock. And then you've got the Intuition album, which, Caught Between the Tigers, title track, Tonight I'm Falling, pretty accessible melodic stuff, but again, some pretty nifty, heavy riffs from Ronnie. And blazing solo. He's got a very distinctive style. He kind of does that rapid picking, staccato style thing, but he doesn't do like the what was popular at the time, the whole Yngwie style thing, the neoclassical shredding. Very different player. Nobody's ever sounded like him. He doesn't really sound like anybody else. Kind of, his tone a little bit early on kind of reminded me of Adrian Vandenberg, but I think he's had more chops than Vandenberg, in my opinion. But some good albums there. Again, if you remember the name TNT and you're like, oh, weren't they like a hair metal band? Not at all. Not at all. So that's what we got. So 20 minutes of forgotten favorites, some kind of cool old stuff, some more recent stuff. Well, recent. Being the last 30 years, right? Can't always talk about the 60s and 70s stuff here. So hopefully you go check out some of that stuff. I will drop the names of these in the description. So you can check them out later and go search for them, but hope you enjoy them. And visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, of course, we're on the mighty YouTube. All sorts of good stuff coming up, so stay tuned. Got a questions and answers show coming up over the next day or 2 or 3, something like that. And other top 10 songs and, all sorts of tomfoolery and what have you. So hope you enjoy it. Stick around, subscribe, tell your friends, all that good stuff. We'll see you real soon. Bye-bye.